So welcome back, Andrew McGonigle, Doctor Yogi, to Keen on Yoga for the second time. It's lovely to have you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Can't believe it's been so long. Time
been a year,
flown, as always.
I know. Been a year. You're still looking as young as ever, and sprightly as ever. So yes. And it's lovely to see you. Thanks for coming back. The good doctor has written a second book. He's been busy as always since we've last met. I think you were writing it actually since we last met. So you haven't written it in under a year because it's a fantastic book. I read it all thoroughly and it's really influenced my way of thinking. It's called The Physiology of Yoga, an evidence-based look at how yoga affects health and well-being. See, I did actually look at my phone to read that off because I wanted to get it right because for the listenership, for the watcher, please get it, please read it, and please absorb it. It's a fantastic book. There he's holding it up, and it's not a sell because I've read it and I love it. So please have a look at it. It's very unusual because Andrew is actually a medically trained doctor. He's also been in the yoga sphere for many years. So he's not trying to debunk stuff, but he's very nice, in a nice kind of way, because Andrew is very nice. He's trying to clearly say what can be and can't be said about yoga in currently, accordingly to current medical and scientific understanding, because there's a lot of snake oil out there. There's a lot of claims that are involved in tradition and traditional understanding, which don't necessarily have any scientific basis. And as always, you're free to believe them if it makes sense to you and if you enjoy those conventions to tradition. On the other hand, if you want a more practical undertaking of yoga, there's a few things that we might discuss today that might pique your interest. So that little intro out of the way, let's start at the beginning and ask you, Andrew, what does evidence-based thinking or research actually involve?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and that's kind of how we kick off the book. We talk about critical thinking, so about actually stopping and thinking about where we're getting our information from, and has that been validated or not, and that helps us to know how to kind of move forward with that. So yeah, basically a good visual is to think of evidence in like a pyramid, and the best qualities at the top and the kind of lowest qualities at the bottom. And what there is there at the bottom really is it's anecdotal information, so personal experiences. Now, that doesn't mean that that's invalid, but we can only give it so much power. And then credence, in a similar kind of level, and then a similar level, we have expert opinion. So if thorough research hasn't been done about a topic, that's where we tend to go to. So we don't really have a choice. We go to expert opinion on a topic, and we go to anecdotal information. But in a lot of cases with yoga, there's a lot of research being done. So we're able to kind of move up the pyramid, and basically we move up, as I said, we move up with quality up there. And at the top, what we've tried to do in the book is we've tried to focus on what are called systematic reviews or meta-analyses, okay? So fancy words, don't worry too much about the terms. But basically, what has happened in these scenarios is a person or a group of people have gathered all the research that is available on a specific topic. So they have searched, and they have exhausted their search to gather everything. And then they put that through a detailed filter for quality. So they basically filter out the study, the research that just isn't very well done, for example, for their different criteria. And then what they're left with is the good research that they're happy with, and they basically summarize it all, present that, and then also present recommendations for further research. So it's the gold standard in terms of evidence base. And that's what we've tried to hone in on. Where possible in the book, if we're looking up a particular topic, we would try to look at, is there a systematic review or meta-analysis about this topic? And then we share that with the reader. And then if not, we would slowly kind of move down the pyramid. So I think for many years in the yoga world, what I've witnessed is that we've held on very firmly to anecdotal information and to expert opinion. And it's taken us some time to kind of move on. And even though research has been done, we've kind of kept coming back to the bottom of the pyramid, and hopefully there's a wave now where we're actually moving with the evidence and looking at things, from a bit more of a full evidence point of view.
Yeah. Is there a way to qualify what expert opinion actually means, and if we should take it on board, how we might assess that as its expert opinion? I mean, for example, I wrote recently on moon days, right, the moon cycle, and people are very keen on this idea that the moon affects the water in the body, and therefore one shouldn't practice yoga on moon days because the water of the body is like the pull of the tide is affected, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then someone mentioned, there's evidence-based opinion on an expert opinion on PubMed, for example, right? Research done. I mean, how... For example, for me, it smacks of some anecdotal ideas. This particular idea, as an example. But then, if I wanted to pursue it further in terms of apply critical thinking and to look at expert opinion, as we're talking now, how might one go further and assess that?
It's such a great question, and this is all part of critical thinking. So really, there isn't this definitive definition of who an expert is.
Unfortunately,
and often there are self-proclaimed experts. Beware of those people.
I can't mention any of them. There are many.
So it's a really, really good point, and I think, where the value is that I see in expert opinion and anecdotal information is that they often inspire better quality research to be done. Okay, so for example, there's been a lot of chat over the years about yoga causes a lot of injuries. There's been these big magazine articles that create a lot of fear and this talk about this teacher's had a hip replacement, therefore it must be bad and all this kind of stuff. Well, that has I know from talking to some researchers that has inspired really good quality research into, does yoga cause injuries, and can we compare it to other forms of exercise, for want of a better word, looking at the physical asana and comparing it to
physical
exercise.
modalities.
So that to me, so for me, anecdotal information and expert opinion is a great starting point. It starts conversations and it inspires people to do their research, and then we're able to move forward. So we need to know when to let go of the expert opinion and move on.
It's tricky, isn't it? How much to follow one's own intuition? That doesn't seem like a reasonable kind of conclusion to reach, and then when to say, well, I'm actually not an expert in this, and I need to defer to someone who has more experience and training than me in that. And I think that line is never conclusive, and there's no clear way to draw that, but I think that both are valid, right? Like one's own intuitions and one's own understanding of and then again the humility to realize when one is lacking in understanding and training, in comparison to someone who's had 25 years. I don't remember who it said this, but I think many people, it's like, well, you haven't earned the right to be an expert, yet, having practiced for a year yoga, right? Like comparatively to someone who has taught for 30 years. On the other hand, you may have a fresher intuition. So the line is always a great one, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But there's only ever, as you said, there's only ever so much credence we can give that. And we have to recognize things for what they are. And if it's expert opinion, we have to realize that's what it is. And, and hope that further research will get done that will clarify. But it's such a great question. You're a great critical thinker, Adam. See?
That's the best compliment anyone can pay me. Thank you. Well, moving on. I mean, obviously, got a few points in the book to cover, and the book it covers really most or so many of the topics that one has heard, or this kind of anecdotal wisdom on over the years. So I love it. And one of these is the stretching the muscle fascia that you mentioned. I think in the second chapter, the idea of the muscle fascia, and these days, people are all forever going into labs and cutting up cadavers and saying, well, there's all this fuzzy stuff in the muscle fascia, and yoga helps to kind of, detoxify or tonify all this stuff. And what's your feeling about muscle fascia? Because it's very trendy these days, let's say, in terms of the yoga right?
Yeah, I think it's an amazing part of the body. It's a part of the body that was neglected for a long time. So we're trying to kind of play catch up in terms of because there's other parts of the body that have just been studied in way more detail, that were given more focus and given more attention. I don't think it's any more important than any other part of the body.
Right.
You know, I don't think it's the missing link. I don't think it's the thing that's going to help us to suddenly decide, oh, why are we all here on the earth? You know what I mean? It's not going to kind of quell any existential crisis. So yeah, I think it's you know, it's something that I'm interested to learn about. I'm always trying to keep on top of the latest thoughts and theories. I think we've got some way to go before we have a really clear understanding of its role in the body. What's really interesting is when I studied medicine many years ago, we did a lot of dissection work.
Yeah.
There was always this bucket beside the cadaver.
Yeah.
And it was basically the superficial fascia kind of removed and put in the bucket. None of us asked, what's in the bucket? You know, so we've come on leaps and bounds. And yeah, it's a really, you know, it's a really...
You do acknowledge some importance in this, in what we're doing.
Oh, no. No, for sure. It's super important. And I think I don't, there's, you know, there are many fascia experts out there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they all completely agree themselves on, you know, the ultimate role of these tissues. How
it works.
So it's just fascinating to watch the story evolve. You know, is this a huge component of how we experience pain in the body? Is this a huge part of how we experience proprioception, which is spatial awareness? You know, there are lots of thoughts and theories about it. So yeah, it's just exciting to see this. And also just things like this just continually make me super excited about the human body. Like, our knowledge really is minuscule. There's way more about the body that we don't understand than we do understand. And that excites me because there's always something more to learn. Keeps us all humble. Yeah.
I think my thoughts on fascia is are they related to a general kind of mobility in muscle? Because obviously the fascia surrounds a muscle, right? So in creating some kind of deep awareness in how you're moving your body, obviously yoga is not football. You know, there's something slightly more concentrated in the particular movements one's doing. Could one get in there in a deep enough manner in self-experience and proprioception to start working on that level of fascia around a muscle joint complex, which may be limited in its range, but having, you know, in the possibility, let's say as a hypothesis of working with fascia, could one mobilize, you know, a muscle complex, joint complex, where it might not previously have been possible, you know, in terms of the way that individual is structured?
Yeah, it's you know, a great question, and I ultimately think we don't know as of today. I think what we posed in the book is that in Yin yoga, we don't necessarily target the fascia. Like the body's one entity, and the fascia is not only wraps the muscle, but it intertwines the muscle. It's seamless running through the entire body. So we were trying to pose the point, you know, that can you isolate one layer of the body as opposed to another? Now, it's been a controversial topic. There have been many discussions that have come off the back of this, but I love generating conversation. So for me, it's exciting that this is.
I was just thinking.
You're not thinking that you must have had, for the sake of it, but
you must have had so many emails and so much feedback on what you've written. Surely,
there's been a few. You know. Yeah, and I think often when you look at a topic like the question you're asking with fascia, I think ultimately you end up with more answers. You know, sorry, you don't end up with more answers. You end up with more questions. You know, the deeper you dive into these topics, you kind of end up going down all these rabbit holes, and more kind of questions arise. So I think we you know, I think it was a really a little sidebar that I imagine that sparked your interest in this question about Yin yoga and fascia. And it's just interesting that, you know, us sharing our stance on it had a ripple effect and started a lot of conversations going. I just don't think we can be black and white. I don't think we can say for sure, if you're teaching Yin yoga, oh, we are targeting the fascia here. Yeah, we are targeting the fascia, but we're also targeting every other layer of the body. We can't impact things in isolation in the body. It just doesn't work that way. So that was really the stance we were taking.
And I think that's, beautifully qualifies the general tone of the book, which isn't, to offer conclusions necessarily. It's just to say, well, there's lots of possibilities out here. And I think you do that really nicely, and to say, well, there's not one definitive way that we say you're experiencing your body in this manner. There's lots of, I think you raise more open-ended debates rather than, closing down on, well, this is because of this and this is because of this. It's like, well, there's lots of possible explanations for this, and lots of,
completely. And, I like to sit on the fence, honestly. Like, I don't ever want to get to a point where I am like, oh, it's 100% this way. That it's rare for us to have the adequate amount of information about a certain part of the body, whatever, to have that amount of certainty. So, I'm also always open to being challenged and being proven wrong. I'm okay with that. Like, the book is not like, oh, we're right. We're the experts. We know everything. It's just like, let's present the current information that's available to us. So let's start some conversations. Let's get people critically thinking. Let's get people questioning stuff in a different way that maybe they just never had before, because I think it could be so easy just as a yin yoga teacher just to go, oh yeah, yin targets the fascia, and not really think any deeper about what does that actually mean? What are the implications of that? Like, what is the evidence? So it's exciting.
I suppose also going back to our original idea about evidence is kind of interweaving one's own experience, and over time, with different possibilities, right? So having a conclusion in one's mind, often stops you actually assessing your experience most intelligently, right? Because everything just feeds into this particular slant that you've got.
Confirmation bias, isn't it? Where you're just, and then you miss all this whole world of different possibilities.
It doesn't agree with your thesis. I'm going to back up a minute on terms of the fascia, because I remember in the workshop which you did with Keen and Yoga, I don't know whether we've still got that available, but it was a fantastic workshop. And you mentioned stretching, and I love your ideas about stretching and range of movement. And I think, as I remember correctly, and I don't know whether it was always also in the book, about not really being able to increase one's range of movement that much through stretching, which is it's a revelation to most people hearing that.
Yeah, this should be in the book. So you can. So I'll clarify that you can increase range of movement, but what you don't do is you don't change the length of your muscle. So what really the science is telling us is that muscle does not shorten or lengthen over time.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we can contract a muscle.
Yeah.
And in the moment it will shorten, we can stretch a muscle, and in that moment it will lengthen, but it doesn't get longer and longer or shorter and shorter over time. There's so much talk about prolonged sitting shortens your hip flexors. Yeah. And I always joke and say we'd be like a T-Rex. If we were saddled and everything shortened, we'd literally be like walking around like this all day. And think of how much stretching of our hamstrings we do in yoga. If they lengthened every time we stretched them, they'd be hanging off of us, But what the science world is telling us is that what the latest thoughts are is that something that's called stretch tolerance, and basically the nervous system governs how the muscle behaves, and depending on our approach, the nervous system might grant our muscle the ability to stretch a little further over time. Yeah, and it's basically the sensation that stops us, because what we'll all do is be forward fold, and often it's the sensation that limits us. Now, not in all cases, sometimes it can be compression on the other side that's stopping us, but often it's actually a sensation that stops us. And over time, that sensation comes a little later, so we're able to move further. Does that make sense? So these are the latest thoughts on this. So stretch tolerance, it's fascinating.
So, I mean, to ask the most obvious question then, what allows some people to stretch their muscles more than others, outside obvious skeletal differences?
Yeah, so there'll be skeletal differences.
It's literally sensation, just the feedback on the central nervous system.
And obviously,
not allowing those muscles, because everyone has the same muscles. So why does some people? And you see them over years, right? Like someone will come to your class for a number of years, and they won't necessarily develop that much in their range of motion, whereas another person will develop their range of motion exponentially. So
it's very complicated. simplifying that kind of element of it. Yeah, and different people have different composition of muscle, and there's a whole sort of things. But yeah, so but ultimately, it is the nervous system that is the limiting factor in most cases. And for example, a lot of people believe, I have short hamstrings. Well, actually, if you were under general anesthetic, the chances are that you'd be able to someone would be able to put you in a deep forward fold. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So the muscle does have that ability in many cases, but it's just that there are other factors when we're awake that come into play, to affect that. So it's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. What about hypermobility and all this talk then about overstretching? And, and then I also wonder, like along with that kind of, I've often heard that, in fact, from other medicals, that you could do, I often say about Baddha Konasana, that under an anaesthetic, you could do Baddha Konasana, for example. But then I kind of wonder, is there a structural impediment that, if someone was put into certain things, that their muscles would then rip, that they, it was more than that?
Maybe. And for me, for example, when I do Baddha Konasana, my knees have never reached the floor. Because basically what I've discovered through a lot of personal exploration, for want of a better word, is that my hip joints don't actually move and don't have a huge range of movement in that particular direction. So I don't feel a tightness, say, in my inner thigh. It's not about me getting more stretch in the inner thigh, but it's actually I get bone on bone when the hip moves in that direction. But then I can change slightly and do a wide leg forward fold. And, when I've been practicing regularly, I can almost get my chest to the floor. So, I've been able to get my leg behind my head in yoga. So it's just, but there's certain movements. For example, my fire log, like if you saw me, it would be an embarrassment. The yoga police would come and kick me out. Basically, my fire log, my legs are like this kind of thing. It's like, I look like I've never practiced yoga a day in my life, basically. But that's just the way my hips move or don't move,
Yeah.
I'm still enlightened, so it's fine.
What about this idea of hypermobility then, and warning people off for overstretching?
Yeah, hypermobility is a big topic, and I think where some of the confusion lies is that hypermobility is a huge spectrum. You can have someone on one end of that spectrum that just happens to be able to forward fold very deeply, or they have very bendy thumbs. And then you can have someone on the other end that literally has a hypermobility syndrome, where it affects all the tissues of the body. It affects the digestion. It affects the way they experience pain, and expects energy levels. It's a huge thing. So I think that I think we often use hypermobility as a umbrella term, but it can mean so many different things to so many different people. And often it's yoga teachers that are diagnosing people with hypermobility. So if you're listening out there, stop doing that. I've had so many people, where they can easily hyperextend their elbow, say even on all fours or in plank, and they've been told by a yoga teacher, "Oh, you're hypermobile," and then that becomes part of their identity. And then they've told me they're hypermobile, and I go, just out of curiosity, is this something you've seen a medical professional about? My yoga teacher told me. So I think it's such a broad term. I'm not really answering your question, am I? But you're saying that with hypermobility, can you like damage? I think the question
is should we be worried about it? And seeing its endemic usage in the yoga world these days, almost like before it was like getting in trouble for not working hard enough. Now it's like, well, if you go too far in a stretch, it's like, well, no, watch out, you're going into hypermobility there, and is it a cause for general concern, or is it something which has just now become a catch-all for just a control of a classroom and then giving a certain structure to teaching?
Yeah, I think becoming clear on what hypermobility actually means in terms of a particular student is the first step. Because if you have, say, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a hypermobility syndrome, certain positions can have a big impact on you. You can end up feeling in pain for days after after overstretching, you know, for example, whereas for other people, they're not going to be as impacted. So really it depends on the person. And it's just getting, as I said, clarification on what in a certain circumstance, what does hypermobility actually mean for that person? So I think it's definitely a conversation that needs to keep being had. It does. Yeah. It's very, very important. It has a huge implication for many people, but it's become over kind of generalized.
Yeah. And I think, that's kind of the answer that, no, sorry, I was just going to say, that's kind of the answer that I wanted from you, really, that, you know, that one has to become clear about, you know, exactly the usage of these things. And you speak really well on the fear-based language that seems to be surrounding yoga these days. And it's made me think a lot. And how much that this can then lead to a kind of nocebo effects where, as you say, people come to you and they've taken on this as part of their identity, or, you know, I'm someone that's hypermobile, therefore, you know, like yoga is a problem for me, or, you know, and I hear it all the time. You know, I've been told that I have this, so therefore I can't do this. You know, would you say that we're now, you know, kind of experiencing a tendency to rather wrap ourselves up in cotton wool too much?
Yeah, and in a broad sense, yes, you know, there is that, and there's a huge fear. I spend a lot of time with yoga teachers, and you know, training yoga teachers in anatomy and stuff, and there is just a lot of fear about anytime I ask, you know, why is it important to learn anatomy? One of the top things that come up in any group is protect the students. It's about protect the students. And I'm like, well, okay, you know, let's talk about this. What are we protecting them from? Because even if you have a regular student, even if they come to you every day for an hour, what are they doing all the other hours? Like, are you following them around and like telling them not to pick up their shoes like that? Yeah. You know, because ultimately we're all robust human beings, you know, and yes, some of us are slightly less robust than others for various reasons, but you know. Yeah, I think for a while the pendulum's gone too far in one way, where there's this like, oh my God, I need to protect everyone. And a lot of it's this anecdotal chat about, oh, yoga causes injuries. And of course it can. Like I have been injured in the past from practicing yoga, but I've also practiced thousands of hours of yoga and haven't injured myself in 99.9% of the time. So yeah, I think to answer your question, I think in many cases, the pendulum has gone too far in one way. It's all about protection.
Yeah. I mean, it swung the other. Well, I mean, as yoga developed, I think it was maybe a little bit, say, like gung ho, as it were. Yeah. You know, just you know, like, I mean, I started. It was just like, oh, do the full primary class. Everyone just learns a full primary series as a beginner, right? You know, so maybe that was a little bit over the top, you know. And now it seems like the fear-based kind of language has kind of become ensconced to the degree that people can't move at all. You know, it's like, oh, don't do that.
And it's like micromanages people. It makes people think that their body is fragile.
Yes.
It's you know, particularly like there's so much, and there's already so much language in our culture about our lower back, about our knees, that already make people think that almost these are parts of our body that are somehow broken. And that's just not the case in most scenarios, you know. So I think that language, sometimes it might feel like, oh, so what if I say, you know, keep your knee above your ankle to protect your knee, but it's constantly adding to this dialogue that we already often have, that, you know, that our bodies are fragile. They're not. They're anti-fragile. You know, our body needs stress. Our body responds positively to physical stress, you know, when we experience that appropriately. So yeah, it's language is a huge thing.
Yeah, and we define ourselves in language, and then we embody ourselves in language. So I mean, how to use and you know, I don't know what you've got up on in terms of what you're doing online or in person, but I mean, Andrew is really, really thoughtful and great about explaining in terms of cueing and good use of a language, which he's thought a lot on, and I've learned a lot from Andrew. So please look at that stuff. Yeah, I have. What about lower back pain? You know, feeding onto that, like yoga is good for your lower back pain, or yoga is bad, and what's the evidence on that? And when people come to you, they come to me and say, well, I can't do yoga because my doctor says it's bad for my lower back.
Yeah, I think ultimately movement's medicine, you know. So basically, as humans, we have evolved to move, and we need to move our bodies more, than most of us already do, you know. So, you know, if I know, and I'm human, I experience lower back pain occasionally. I feel pretty good in my body most of the time, thankfully. But, you know, but for me, it's like, oh, I need to move my spine more. You know, so I think in that sense, yoga is wonderful practice for getting ourselves into our body, you know, learning to move our spine in lots of different ways. So yeah, ultimately, movement is the thing that's going to really help.
It's general lower back pain. What about I mean, people say, well, I can't. I've got this problem with my lower back, so I can't forward fold. Or
I've heard that before.
Conversely, they could obviously, or conversely, I can't back bend. You know, back bend.
Yeah,
I've got a lower back. You know, what is any ideas about?
Well, I had this person come to class say, "Oh, I can't forward fold." So I'm thinking, well, you physically can't, or you've been told you can't, or I was like, oh, this is this whole big like, you know, complicated dialogue's been created. So we're starting the class, we're on all fours, and then we're doing some cat cows. They're happily moving, you know, and cat-cow flexion extension. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you obviously can forward fold your spine. Then at the end of the class, I just happened to mirror that back and just say, you know, you told me that you can't flex, but did you know that this is also flexing your spine? And they were just like mind blown. They were like, oh, you know, they were just like, oh my God, I can flex my spine. And yeah, you can. So I think it's a complicated one, isn't it? But yeah, again, there's no good or bad. It's just like, let's just move. And honestly, what's way worse than over flexing or overextending is not moving. Like, not moving is way worse than moving too much. So I would just say, keep moving. And it's really interesting, you know, I've been doing quite a bit of research lately on osteoporosis, and that, you know, it's an important thing to know about. And, you know, it's decreased bone mineral density, so it comes with a higher risk of fracture. And the British Osteoporosis Society basically just say, like, we need to encourage people to move, because not moving is way worse than moving too much. You know, so the risks that come along with not moving are worse than the risks of overextending or overexerting yourself. So it's just like, we need to be more active. So,
I mean, along those lines, I mean, you do mention osteoporosis in the book, and other kind of evidence-based trials on whether actually yoga helps for osteoporosis. Does yoga help for depression, for example? And there, you know, like, are there any conclusive studies that yoga is actually good for any particular condition or bad for any particular condition?
No, you know, it's there's definitely there aren't many where I would say, oh, it's bad for it.
Right.
You know, I can't really, nothing really comes to mind. But yeah, you know, it is. Yeah, there's some great research on yoga for depression. It can help a lot of people. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean that that you can only do yoga, you know, in isolation and not have any other sort of treatment plan, you know, but it can be a big part of a plan to move forward with that. It can be great for anxiety. There are so many things. Stress is honestly one of the things, because also stress has such a ripple effect. You know, when we're stressed, it affects every system of the body, and yoga can have a really wonderful impact on creating a little bit more balance where it comes to stress. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, my mind was blown at how much research there has been done about yoga. When you flick through all the references in the book, there's a lot of references. You know, there's a lot of studies been done. Are they all studies? Are they all amazing quality? No, but they're a start, and hopefully there's going to be more and more stuff. So yeah, there's loads of stuff. You know, I'm just writing my newsletter. I'm adapting a bit of the book, and there's a lot of really positive information about how yoga can affect pregnancy, about pregnancy symptoms, about birth outcomes, about labor outcomes, delivering a child. You know, there's a lot of positive things that can be taken from a yoga practice, and things that, you know, yoga can help many people manage pain during their periods, cramps, like this. And and again, there's research done about it. So it's pretty remarkable.
Right. Since I've got you here, just a couple of questions then on what about yoga for pregnancy? And people often say, especially with Ashtanga, you shouldn't do any jumping. You shouldn't practice for the first 3 months as the baby attaches to the uterus. The same with my recently contentious stuff on menstruation, that you shouldn't practice over your menstrual cycle, and that you shouldn't women shouldn't do inversions. We were talking off camera before we started about this idea that during menstruation women shouldn't do inversions. It reverses the flow of blood. So a couple of little little topics there for you. What do you think?
Yeah, for pregnancy, there's some great research that tells us that being active during pregnancy is totally safe. It's actually a really important way of navigating that chapter, in a woman's life. So being active is really important. Yoga, through the research, has been shown to be a safe practice. Obviously, the term I'm practicing yoga can also mean many things.
So many things,
it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go and do rocket yoga as someone that's brand new to yoga. There needs to be common sense here. And I think if someone is new to yoga, I think a good place is to go to prenatal yoga with a teacher that is trained in that. But for someone that has an established practice, yes, modifications will need to be taken into account, but really you can kind of get on with your practice, as long as you're feeling good with it. So again, like activity, exercise, yoga during pregnancy, great thing. Does not increase the risk of miscarriages or anything like that through the research, which is really, really great to hear. And then, there's a lot of talk about yoga and menstruation, and it's very patriarchal. It's not evidence-based, the idea of not inverting during a period. And I think what I have a particular problem with is again, the fear aspect. It's like, people have been told, if you invert, you're going to end up with endometriosis, and there's just, the body just doesn't work that way. And what the research tells us about menstrual blood is it's the contraction of the uterus that dictates the flow of blood and not how we're orientated in space. So for example, a female astronaut can still, menstruate as normal. Without
So what affects the contraction of the uterus then? Because people do, female students do complain after practicing Ashtanga during their period and over their periods that they do lose the menstrual cycle. So can you say why that could be?
So the contraction of the uterus is managed by hormones. But as to why people might not get their period, I don't have the answer to that. It might just be that they're pushing their body physically too much. A little bit like a lot of young dancers, ballerinas don't have their period for years, but just because they're pushing their body to its limits with the physicality of it. So I think it's a complex topic. I don't have an easy answer for it. But definitely in terms of inverting, it's up to the individual practitioner. Do you want to invert today? Do you not? And what are the other options if you don't want to? It just has to be, you have to give people choice.
And understanding that the discourse is this kind of patriarchally framed discourse of jurisdiction over a female body still, and the same with the idea of miscarriages. So it's like, miscarriages in the first 3 months are hugely common, unfortunately. So to that end, it's like, people do miscarriage. Many of them miscarriage over the first 3 months, but is it to do with yoga? They happen to also be practicing yoga, so so. No, not necessarily at all. So the evidence and the critical thinking around things is constantly needs to be assessed. More and more thoughtfully. I suppose what I'm trying to say.
Because ultimately, that could mean that someone stops practicing for months if they're pregnant, and and it might
it's
going to really affect their well-being. In many ways. So I just think that
emotional.
And also just puts a lot of shame in people who are menstruating in a class. I have to be different to everyone else. Like I'm not allowed to do that. Like, no, of course you are. But you get to choose, does this feel good for you today or not?
Yeah, you imagine the shame if someone's been practicing and then they miscarriage, and then the doctor says, were you practicing yoga or something? I mean, it's possible, isn't it? That, this feeling that like, oh, it was my fault, because the yoga did it to me. It's like, and I think it's nice, Andrew does quite often. It's just open up the subject so it's not so closed and conclusive, and say, well, and fear based as well. I think what you've shown me is that things, that the body is anti-fragile rather than fragile, which is kind of unusual to hear from a medical professional, because we're so used to having the opposite almost, whether it's on purpose or not, our body's framed in the opposite manner to us, by the medical establishment. The body is dangerous.
But things are moving forward, and even all the latest research about osteoarthritis, which was very much, this like wear and tear model, and running's bad for your knees and all stuff. It's really changing, and we're realizing that actually we're reframing the way we look at that, and actually running is not bad for your knees. Running is actually good for your knees in many cases. Yeah. That's and crazy. Again, it's just all about movement. And many people who were, who in the past would have been pushed down the route of having a total knee replacement are now going to have physiotherapy instead, and they'll get similar outcomes. So it's really, really fascinating. We're, over the years, the whole way we look at arthritis is going to change drastically. Yeah. So
we're supposed to realize also that all this stuff is always an evolution, right? If we if we cling on to it too rigidly, it's imagine clinging on to evidence 100 years ago, and how much of that would have been now overruled by new studies. And
we just do the best that we can at the time, don't we, based on what we have at hand, and then we just have to move
I think
on.
In the tone of the conversation as well, bringing in one's own, some degree, one's own, confidence to assess carefully opinions of the experts against one's own experience and intuition, and get differing opinions. So along those lines, since I've got you here, Andrew, what about knees and people, the endemic, I've torn my meniscus, and can I or can't I rehab it? And will an arthroscopy, a knee operation, basically where they shave the meniscus down, will that help or be detrimental to my practice? Do you have anything to say about knees in yoga practice in any form or fashion?
Again, our information is evolving. So, for example, the anterior cruciate ligament, which is a ligament we hear a lot about in sport and things like that, particularly in football. And,
not so much
not uncommon to hear mention of it. You hear it sometimes in yoga. For many years, we believed that this ligament was just not able to repair on its own, that you had to have surgical treatment for that to happen. And we're moving away from that idea with the latest science. We're realizing that actually there are ways to help the ligament to repair, and it can be a long process, but without surgical intervention. So again, it's just super fascinating. I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't know loads about the latest thoughts on the knee menisci and where that is going. But for the listeners at home, if you do want to do your own research on a topic, Google can be intimidating, and you can go down many a rabbit hole. There is a search engine within Google called Google Scholar, and it is basically filled with all of the available research papers on particular topics. So in Google, you can type in Google Scholar. You'll come into another search engine. You can write
fantastic.
Whatever particular topic you want to look up. For example, yoga and knee menisci. Healing menisci. And you'll be amazed at how many papers come up. And again, I would look for systematic reviews, and you might be surprised there might be one there. There might be like a review of that topic done by people. But it's good. Thank you for the question. I'm going to add it to my ongoing list of things that I just need to update myself on, because it's
such a common thing, isn't it? I mean, with the yoga and the lotus posture, and it's like, well, I think every second or third person has had or does suffer with knee trouble, and I had, I've been perfectly open about having both knees operated on about 20 years ago. After a couple of years of yoga, I had both knees done arthroscopies on both menisci. Which is successful then, I have to say on camera, on record, I wouldn't do them now. I think, as a 43-year-old man, I feel that there's general wear and tear there, and the prognosis wouldn't be the same. People often ask me, I'm stepping from toes here. I'm not a doctor, but just in my opinion is that, I think it worked out then, and I'm not sure, the general rule could be made, if I give
I'll be interested to see if there is any research that's been done looking even at the prevalence of menisci injuries in yoga. Like there may have been some studies looking at that. There may not be.
I'm sure there are. So it's been so endemic in the yoga world. Well, moving on rapidly, I know that and you've got so much time with you. So what about the parasympathetic nervous system? And you often hear this claim, yoga soothes, it regulates. Yoga regulates the parasympathetic nervous system against our fight or flight impulses. Well, would you think that's a superficial paradigm, or do you think it's actually true?
No, I think it's, there's definitely a reasonable amount of information out there that tells us that yoga can stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is a good thing. I think what I find is many people think of the sympathetic nervous system as something that's bad. Yeah, and the parasympathetic something that's good. It's not that simple. It's a dance. We actually need them to be able to dance with each other, so that we're constantly coming into some sort of balance or moving through a state of balance. So really, a healthy nervous system is a nervous system that can adapt quickly to what's going on around you, because honestly, you can be in too much parasympathetic. You can go too far the other direction, and you just you're not reacting to things. And you can also be too stressed. So actually, it's really about finding some sort of middle ground there. But there's a lot of great things. So basically, that just to go into the science of it a little bit.
Yes, I was going to ask how does that happen?
So one way that we can access the parasympathetic nervous system is through our breath. And basically, when we exhale, our heart rate slows. And when we inhale, our heart rate speeds up. And it's just a natural phenomenon. So in yoga, what we often do is we often focus on lengthening the exhale. And therefore, we will be creating like a parasympathetic nervous system stimulation by that act, very, very simple. But also the vagus nerve, which is one of the largest components of the parasympathetic nervous system, it travels through the face. It innervates part of the mouth, part of the inner ear, travels down the throat, and then travels through most of the thorax. And Ujjayi breath is believed to, the resonance of it is believed to stimulate the vagus nerve. Chanting is believed to.
Right.
There's a lot of great things that we can do in yoga that are going to help with that, help us to find a little bit of balance there. So it's good. There's not as much information as you might think there is, but there is some information out there.
And I suppose I should mention I've done this quite a good interview with Stephen Porges as well. Who was I think he was the founder, wasn't he, or at least the popularizer of this theory and of the importance of pointing out the importance of the polyvagal theory. That was his theory, indeed. So that's a good podcast. Diaphragm. How does that relate to breathing and oxygen? Any ideas about the muscle or the membrane of the diaphragm? Is it a muscle? Is it a membrane? What does it do in yoga?
So it's the muscle of inspiration. So it's basically how we breathe. Do you want me to go into the mechanics of it, or what do you think, or what? Sure. Maybe shortly the mechanics and its relevance to yoga and the breathing. And, it kind of comes in the middle of the body, right? So it seems like it has an importance. It's hugely important. It basically separates the chest from the abdomen. It's a dome, and basically, when we inhale, the diaphragm subtly flattens, and actually the lungs themselves are elastic tissue, but they don't have any muscle. But they're forced through a vacuum to follow the movements of the chest. So as the diaphragm lowers and the ribs expand, air is drawn into the lungs. Doesn't have any choice. Moves from high pressure to low pressure. And then as we exhale, the diaphragm domes back into position and air is exhaled. But yeah, so we can't survive without our diaphragm. Does yoga make the diaphragm work any better? Maybe, but there's only so far it can go. A lot of people say things like, Kapalabhati is going to like strengthen the diaphragm. Well, it might to a certain degree, but then it's not going to keep strengthening it, because strength has to be then progressive. You have to keep adding load to become stronger, like working out at the gym. So yoga is going to strengthen. If you've never practiced yoga before and then you practice yoga for a month, your diaphragm is going to become stronger, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it keeps getting stronger with each month of yoga. Does that make sense? It's going to plateau.
I suppose along those lines, I'm going to segue towards the fact that yoga seems to be overly skewed towards flexibility and of joints and joint complexes as opposed to strength. Have you got any ideas about how to insert a strength-based aspect into yoga as opposed to just stretching into can be destabilizing the joints?
Stretching has its place, and there are benefits to be had from stretching. I think strength work is important, and it's more important as we age. Like strength work, resistant work, and load bearing becomes even more and more important as we age because our muscles naturally atrophy as we age. So, it's gone are the days where, maybe with older generations, you would have had much more of a sedentary lifestyle as you age. I think now people are encouraged to be more and more active. So strength work is really important. I think also what's fascinating is that a lot of people think that strengthening your body is going to decrease your range of movement. In a lot of cases, that's not the case. Often it will increase your range of movement because often tightness is there because of weakness. So for example, if you have really, really tight hamstrings and you have been stretching them for years, well, one of the definitions of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Spend a little bit less time stretching them, spend some time strengthening them, and you might notice that your range of movement increases. So strength work is really important. And I think people are more open to that now in yoga. Now, when I practiced Ashtanga back in the day, you weren't allowed to go to the gym. You weren't allowed to go for the run.
No, definitely not. No, that'll tighten the body. Anything. And it's like even... I heard in Mysore, even getting on a bicycle would be bad. Bad for yoga. So going to the gym would be, just a reason to be struck off the Ashtanga.
For sure. But strengthening work is
so that's
really
that's a good point to put in. That actually the tightness often comes from a weakness, not a lack of
Because I think in the sorry to interrupt you. I think in the past. We were encouraged to believe that yoga was all encompassing and yoga was going to tick all the boxes and it's all you needed. And I think we're just hopefully more of us are being more open to the fact that yoga is wonderful. It helps so many of us in so many ways, but often we also need other things and that's okay. It doesn't take away from what the practice has to offer, but it's just, having a more well-rounded form of physical activity in your week is probably going to make you feel even better and even stronger and healthier. So it's just being open to that as well.
Similarly, along those lines, the kind of magic spell or panacea of the bandhas or the bandhas, the general answer to everything really from many yoga teachers that not enough bandha or even too much bandha. What is your understanding of bandha? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I've always seen it as an energetic thing. It's an energetic seal or lock, and can we translate that onto a part of the body and say, this is the physical equivalent? You know what I mean? Maybe I'm not finding the words, but so I've always
representation of the body.
Representation. I've always seen it more as like a energetic thing that can help many people. I think sometimes there can be such a strong focus on it that it does very much become physical, and you have, say, people gripping a pelvic floor for an hour, which is not going to really help anyone, particularly if you've got pre-existing pelvic floor issues. If your pelvic floor is already hypertonic and you're gripping it for an hour in Ashtanga, it's going to exacerbate any symptoms that you're having, you know. So I think sometimes in my perspective, there can just be a little bit too much focus on these things. Again, it's just trying to find a sweet spot. I think it can be really special to draw people's awareness to, what is your pelvic floor doing in this position? Just part of general body awareness. It's just as important to be aware of the pelvic floor as it is what your shoulder's doing. But so I would recommend people use it more as like an observational thing about gaining awareness rather than, there is something you need to be doing in this moment with that part of the body, you know?
Right.
I don't know, what are your thoughts on it, Adam? Just to throw it back to you.
Yeah, no, that's great. I tend to focus more on Uddiyana Bandha, and they understand that it has a relationship to better accessing the breathing potentially, that you can better manipulate your thoracic pressure. It has some engagement of, because that area may draw. I know I'm scared to talk to you because you're
you're safe.
The area,
safe space.
The area would engage the breathing in such a manner that the diaphragm would be mobilized more, and that will affect the body's ability on a number of levels, including your with the diaphragm, the range of movement around your scapula, which I suggest is actually what core strength or core mobility means. Is your ability to engage the all the muscles around your scapula more effectively. So your skeleton.
It's a cool way of thinking about it.
Yeah. So that's my understanding of it through my own experience in my own body. But I don't.
Is that your expert opinion?
No, it's not my expert opinion. I'm gonna, as much as I do tend to hijack interviews, I'm happy to remain in the sidelines for this one. What about the idea of detoxification? Yoga purifies or detoxifies the body. Ooh. Yeah, and also since I realised we're running out of time, I might just also segue that into diet. So detoxification, yoga, and anything about diet you could suggest. Diet and digestion.
Yeah, if I had been given, £1 for every time I've heard, yoga detoxifies the body. Yeah, it's definitely like a big snake oil kind of thing. In most cases, our body is already so good at eliminating waste from the body. If we had to rely on twisting to do that, we'd be in trouble. So if your body isn't already detoxifying optimally, you're going to be critically ill. And just the idea that we can, make a certain movement and all of a sudden it's going to help with that. It's a little bit silly, really, And also it could be harmful. People might think, well, I twist twice a day so I can eat whatever the hell I want, and I'm going to help the body eliminate it. I think our body's just so much more sophisticated than that, and most of the time our body is doing a perfect job without us having to intervene. And it's similar with the immune system, and yoga can boost the immune system. Well, it's just such a people throw that out and really don't take time to
more or less for anything. Really, this will pretty anything will potentially boost your immune system.
And what I'll say is that yoga as part of a healthy lifestyle can help your detoxification system to work optimally, but it's not going to give you some superpower that takes you beyond that. It's just, yoga, breathing well, moving our body. It's just going to help our body do what it needs to do. And I would leave it there. I think it's dodgy territory to talk about that. Yeah. So, diet's a big one. I think what yoga has helped me with diet is just to eat mindfully. It's helped me to be more mindful of the food that I'm choosing to eat and also how I'm eating it. It's allowed me to stop and savor my food and also reflect
make better choices on that level.
Better choices, and go, last night I had a certain meal and today in my practice, I feel a certain way. So am I making the right choices or not?
Yeah, it also gives you some criterion for assessment on a very subjective and immediate level.
Yeah, because often I think we just eat and don't really think about it. Like, just like we do with a lot of things.
You wouldn't notice, right? If you weren't having a daily practice, for example, where you could ascertain the effects of your food, you wouldn't notice that burger the night before maybe wasn't as good as blah, blah, blah,
exactly.
for you, right? So it does give you a kind of standard to measure yourself against.
Yeah, so I think that for me is the biggest, take home. It's just, I found that the yoga practice just changed the way I thought about food and the way also just, the mindfulness of it, which is really special, and I'm grateful for that.
It's not an immediate connection that I'm gonna draw here, but I want to put it in anyway because I've had many people say to me recently on the position of the lotus. We mentioned this before we started. So the position of the lotus and Ashtanga. And I always get this confused, not that I don't know it, but those are kind of like, I have to kind of mentally do it in my body. So it goes, the right leg goes first in Ashtanga, right? And then you put the left leg in, Now this is particular of Ashtanga and very specific and very closely guarded, that it has to be this way, it always has to be right leg over left. And the wisdom seems to point to the fact that it's convention that the Brahmanical traditions favour strongly right over left, right-handed practices as opposed to left-handed tantric practices. But many people will have adapted I think what Patabi Joyce said, and maybe, I don't know whether Krishnamacharya said this, about the purification of the liver and the spleen with the heel positions. And it's just one example of a yoga, how can we say, anecdotal yoga wisdom, being inserted and so strongly guarded and believed in, even to this day, actually, in the yoga tradition.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, about that? And now that we're talking about this, I've never really looked into it. It might be something to do with pressure points on the foot, and I enjoy reflexology. I've had treatments and things, and I've felt certain benefits from it. So I'm very open to all this kind of stuff. But I just think that again, my problem with it is it becomes so dogmatic, and it's like there is a right way and everything else is wrong. And like, what's going to happen if we put the left foot in first? Are we going to spontaneously combust or something? Do you know what I mean? So
also, it might be. I mean, if you're always doing one side first, then it's creating it's creating a structural imbalance. I mean, I don't think that's going too far to say that if you're doing it continuously every day, day in day out. Right?
And you also need to have actually quite a lot. Like, say for example, if you have a left hip that is less mobile, then that could stop you ever from doing lotus, and that's okay. Like, we don't have to practice lotus, but like, it's just these rules. I think tradition has its place, and I think as we were chatting, before the recording, it's nice to have some sort of framework or some sort of rule book. Yeah. But also we need to just know when it's okay to kind of step away from that and like play with other options, So but ultimately
it's like learning a language, isn't it? Like it's like a language, but in order to make it your own and to talk in your own voice, you also have to bend the rules of language, knowing the stylistic precedents involved in the framework. You also know when you can take something out and when you can't, right? When you can take a verb out or bend that verb, and when something, if you take out that beam, if you take out that kind of part of the structure, the whole thing crumbles and you can't be understood at all, or what you're doing, can't be understood. As you
so it's like there's certain and then ultimately you take so much stuff away and you're like, well, is this even yoga? And that's a whole conversation for another time. But it's about trying to find a balance there.
For sure.
I might not be the right person for that, but I'd rather listen to that than be involved.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll as long as you're not listening to my medical diagnosis. The first spotlight turned on me for a while. Eddie Stern did it a lot, but since
sorry,
Eddie, I think you're no, it's wonderful. I love a chat like you do. I think I think the tenure of this interview, and our discussion, and my work, and it sounds like your work, certainly from the book, is also just empowering someone to make their own inquiries, right? To not to say, well, Andrew's the expert or Adam's the expert, and here you go. It's like, well, you've got your own intuitive framework going on as well. There's a whole bunch of experience that you can bring to the table. There also, if you're interested and open, there's all these people that have differing opinions and conclusions that you can also bring in, and you've got all these different tools to finally, because the self-responsibility has to finally come down to oneself, and that's an important part of the yoga practice as well, having the courage and the self-confidence to come into your own experience of self, rather than someone else's, and that. But that, to be skillful in that and to be intelligent in that, and for that to go well, I think it also is foolhardy to just think that you can just do that out of the ether. It takes training and it takes, it takes recourse to other so-called experts and learning, in fact, who is the expert. And also developing your relationship with your experts, right? Someone's expert advice works for a while, and then that it gradually shifts into an evolution in your own thinking.
Yeah, and just taking everything with a little pinch of salt as well. I don't know.
Is that if I'm going to wrap up this interview now, would that be your parting words, or would you have?
I should have written that on the book, shouldn't I?
Take at the end, as the epilogue. Take all of this with a pinch of salt and carry on. Like a bit like the Bhagavad Gita, really. If you've heard all of this, just now do what you want. Exactly. Having heard all this, it's up to you. Well, I suppose all that remains is to thank you for your time, Andrew. And if you want to find Andrew, I suppose your website is eponymously named, andrewmcgonigle.com.
It's Doctor all spelled out.
Yeah,
Dr. Yogi, and the book's available everywhere. That sells books.
Buy the book, and I only get people on that I really have read the book and really enjoyed. So I do appreciate really that. Recommend it. Yeah, it's a great book. Please.
Yeah, and we're running a book club, which is really fun. So we did one this year. We're doing one in January and February, where Matt and I, who's my co-author, we basically guide everyone through a chapter each week live online. It's really fun.
Oh, cool.
And people have really enjoyed it. So, because it's one thing buying the book and then you're like, oh God, I now have to bloody read the thing. So, it's been a really fun experience. So I'm looking forward to doing the next book club in January. So
that does sound really good. I may have to join that. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Andrew. It's been another great interview, and
thank you for having me.
Look forward to another year. I hope that we're still in good health and around in another year's time. Thank you very much. All links will be in the stuff below, whatever you're listening to this on, so you can catch Andrew. And again, look at his stuff, read his books, look at his wisdom, if we can call that, because I've benefited from it, so I'm sure you will too. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you, Adam.